Thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining me today with this talk about security. I'm Toni de la Fuente. I'm working as solutions engineer in Alfresco, now in the United States, but I was working for Alfresco in Spain and Portugal a couple of years ago. And one of my topic of interest always have been security. And what I'm going to do today is to present security an Alfresco security best practices guide. But I want to start in a different way than I used to do in other times, in other presentations. What I want to do is to demo how to break into Alfresco or how to break into another web applications, and how easy sometimes, if we don't take care about what are we doing, how easy it is to do some things, just to spark a solution, as Barnaby Jack said a couple of years ago. This guy was a hacker who discovered some vulnerabilities in pacemakers or health hardware, and also he did 2 years ago in the DEF CON Las Vegas a demo of how to get money from an ATM remotely. And this guy was found died last year, just before doing the demo of these pacemakers vulnerabilities. So I think this is something very interesting. This is not about fear. This is about to find a solution. And this is about to let you know, guys, that is with paying attention in some certain things in Alfresco and in your network, in your operating system, it's very easy to sleep a little bit well. Okay? So let me start with a couple of things. I'm going to show, I have here an Alfresco server, and the first thing an attacker or when you are doing a pen testing is trying to do is to discover information, to try to get user passwords, etc. And to try to get into the systems using the most common usernames and passwords. And this is very easy using a command or a lot of different tools. Tools like Hydra, or the Hydra. This is a Unix tool. Just you can use some parameters like a list of common usernames, list of passwords, and I'm using, in this case, the web-app URL because it's very easy to send back and forth HTTP GET queries. And just running that command, you can wait for some seconds, and we can get a list of valid users and passwords. For example, in just 2 seconds, we're going to see this user and password. Let me see. Let me check if I have changed the server IP address. Okay, it's 133. Okay. And the virtual machine has changed the IP address, so, but it's trying to run. Okay, I got it. Boom, and username and password. I'm not going to talk about what this is username. I'm just going to try to get into Alfresco with this username and password. This was this URL, right? And I can use this. And password was let me in. It was easy. I can go to the user homes. Maybe there is an user home called J. Lawrence, and I have some secret pictures. I don't know if to show you what does, but okay, let's see. Oops. So we can find some interesting pictures from this user, even that guy. So that was very easy, and this is not something that is in sometimes it's not related, it's directly related to Alfresco, because we used to connect Alfresco with Active Directory, LDAP, etc. I'm going to talk about that later. Another problem that we can see in Alfresco is, for example, with some old versions of Alfresco versions, we can see. Let me check here. We can see how, using the Alfresco proxy, we can discover the internal Alfresco services in the Alfresco server or in another server in the Alfresco network. This is a vulnerability of Alfresco 2.1 that is already fixed in every Alfresco version. But for example, using the proxy or even using the Semis browser in all versions, we can try to discover internal ports. Of course, I have a virtual machine. I only have one server. It's a localhost server. But look at this. I have an Apache server running here. If I type localhost 80, I can see an expected end of file server. No. Yeah. Yeah. I have to use this IP address. For example, this is the Postgres port, right? And I have an expected end of file from server. I can use another existing port, for example, 80, because I have an Apache. I have an answer that means that the port is open. For example, I can use a closed or a not available port, and the connection is refused. Using this, I can discover internal services. So take care with publishing the proxy. This is already fixed. You have to upgrade Alfresco, of course, but as I mentioned in the guide, and I'm going to mention later, we should take care about the proxy and this kind of things in Alfresco. Another vulnerability in Alfresco, this is just a product-based vulnerability, but also remember that Alfresco has around 300 third-party libraries inside Alfresco. So sometimes we can be vulnerable if a third-party library has a security problem. So what I'm going to show now is a problem with the Apache POI. All of these vulnerabilities are public and are already in the release notes of Alfresco and are already fixed. But what I want to show you now is how to create. I'm not going to show the Word file itself, but with an XML, a specific XML file, you can make Alfresco create an external connection and send information to an external server, and send information about your local server. This is possible thanks to Apache POI vulnerability. Apache POI is a library inside Alfresco. It's the library who parses XML files. And remember, if you upload a file, a Word file in Alfresco, what is a Word file? A docx. It's a zip file that contains XMLs and many other files. When you upload this file to Alfresco, Alfresco parses these files and run different things inside, like for indexing and for extracting metadata, etc. If we have a malformed Word file or XML file, we can trigger some different actions inside Alfresco. Look at this. I'm going to start capturing traffic, sniffing some traffic, and I have here on Alfresco a vulnerable version of Alfresco. Going to my files, and I'm going to drag and drop this nasty file. Okay, the file is already here, and here I'm going to stop and look at this. I will find traffic from my server, 133, to an external server through FTP, because I have an external connection encoding in the XML file inside the Word file to say, hey, send this information to that server. What information? I'm now sending, let me show you. I'm now sending this this list, the list of my etc directory on my Linux server. If you're familiar with Linux, you can see these configuration files. So this is another example of third-party libraries that can affect to the Alfresco security. Of course, inside Alfresco internally, we take care about that, but just to let you know that it's not just about Alfresco. It's more than this. And finally, another example of security, a kind of security problem. You can see that there, the open XML error. An example of out-of-the-box configuration problem is if you leave the shutdown port, for example, open, you can just type something like telnet localhost and type shutdown, and Alfresco is stop it. That's it. So we should change Tomcat default configuration, Tomcat or any other supported application server. So we have seen 4 different vulnerabilities and 4 different approach of doing something against our Alfresco services. What I'm going to do now is to talk about how to control or manage all these problems. And how to solve all of this? Just upgrading. And that's all. Thank you. Well, we have 30 minutes to talk a little bit more about this. As I have said, everything is about the Alfresco Security Best Practices Guide. You can download it from this URL, but also it's available in the Alfresco Summit site. So it's easy to download it. If you download it last week, 2 weeks ago, when I did this talk in San Francisco, please download it again because this is the last version, the last version. Okay, the other one was a draft. This is the last released. Yeah, one of our value pillars in Alfresco, of course, is security. Security from the product point of view and security from the implementation point of view. What I'm going to talk is about implementation and, of course, about some tips. Internally in Alfresco, we used to do a periodic auditory pen testing with the product. For example, we are doing a pen testing this week. And we used to discover vulnerabilities or other security problems, or just trying to follow the OWASP standard. We try to fix or improve the Alfresco security. We have a security policy, but to be honest, the most important thing is to carefully read every single release notes that we publish. This is the way to see what's related to security that you can see between one version and another version. And of course, we send notifications depending on the severity of the different vulnerabilities, but pay attention always to the release notes. And of course, if you find a security issue, you can send an email to support, open a case, and if you are a customer, open a case straight from the support portal. Components to take into account when we are implementing security with Alfresco. The most difficult component, of course, is people, users. We have to take care about the users. And of course, processes, the Alfresco application itself, Java, operating system, firewall, network configuration, everything, almost everything, from the physical door that we can get into our data center or our offices to the people. But I'm going to talk about Alfresco and some other components like network or Java operating system, but most of most part is about Alfresco. Here we go, the Amazon Web Services shared security model. I like to talk about that because if you are familiar with Amazon Web Services, you can see that Amazon said, and they are very clear with this, you are responsible for this part of the security, and we are responsible for this other part. This is very good in the virtualization or in the cloud side, but in Alfresco, almost everything is a responsibility, is a customer or end user responsibility in Alfresco. Of course, if we discover vulnerabilities in Alfresco, we try to fix them as soon as possible, depending on the severity. But this is something for another company, but I like to just to let you know that you have to take care about your hardware, server-side encryption, firewall configuration, platform and application, and these kind of things. This is everything about security, and of course, customer data. Now I want to talk about threats. We can face multiple threats in Alfresco. The first one could be the first thing that any potential attacker can do is to gather information before starting an attack or starting a pen testing. For example, we can use applications like Google, Bing, or Shodan to discover public resources, even without scanning our networks. You can discover users, password. I don't know if you remember my talk 3 years ago about how to get into systems through using metadata, like applications with like FOCA, MetaGoofil, and these kind of things. So it's really, really easy to get information from target and to try to get into their systems. There is a lot of useful information inside the files. If you are publishing files, PDF, Word files, etc., pay attention of the metadata. Remember, when you upload a document to Alfresco, Alfresco extracts metadata, but the metadata is still being inside the file. Metadata like a printer or like a shared network drive, all these things are inside our Word file. And you can extract this information and to see, for example, usernames, network resources, etc. And could be very useful to an attacker to know what do you have internally. So these kind of things can be fixed and can be controlled inside Alfresco, but remember that you can use things like tools for cleaning metadata before releasing information outside Alfresco, remove the Alfresco banner from the Alfresco login page, for example, and using intrusion detection systems to see what's going on with these network connections between internet and our Alfresco systems. Of course, most of these tips are related to an Alfresco installation facing the internet. Okay? But anyway, sometimes the most potential or dangerous users are internally. So we have to take care about both internally and external users. Brute force attack like password or dictionary attacks, as we have seen. We can use tools like the Hydra or Metaxploit to try to exploit a lot of different HTTP services or even FTP or whatever inside Alfresco. As you know, Alfresco has many different protocols or interfaces. So what we should do is to use an intrusion detection system or prevention detection systems. Also a good password policy with password rotation, with the strength policy. Of course, if you have your Alfresco integrated with an Active Directory or LDAP, use error logging threshold and these kind of things to prevent. But take care with this error logging threshold because we can create our own denied of service attack. If after, for example, after 3 failed logging, the user is blocked, the user cannot get access to the system. So we have to almost any directory service has very different policies to control that kind of things. If our Alfresco is in the internet, we should prevent this kind of attacks. Most of them is distributed denied of service attacks, or denied of service attacks, or even man-in-the-middle attacks, or even viruses. No one used to talk about viruses, but you can store everything in Alfresco, so maybe you should take care about virus. You can use antivirus in different tiers of your network, or even inside Alfresco, there is some third-party tools to control the viruses in your content inside Alfresco. And of course, to avoid DOS attacks, this is not very easy to address, but using a good architecture design, firewalls, and different solutions or network solutions, we can manage these kind of things. Of course, there is a lot of more information in the security guide about this kind of threats. Vulnerabilities. Since Alfresco was released, we have found a lot of vulnerabilities. It's software. Any software has vulnerabilities, security issues. And we try to fix them as soon as possible, of course. And we have had some public vulnerabilities, some of them related to third party, like the Moodle connector or Joomla connector, but this is nothing new for Joomla to be in the security in this kind of pages. But for example, the Apache Commons file upload, this is another example of a vulnerability for a third-party library, but affects to Alfresco. And other internal sources, this is our Jira, the issues.alfresco.com codes. You can get access and to have more information about the vulnerabilities that I have showed before, like the shared remote execution, or the POI, or port scanning, and this kind of thing. So in this, using that code, you can see what Alfresco versions are affected. Of course, any new Alfresco version is fixed, is already fixed. Okay, now we are going to review what can we do in the different layers, the network and operating system. Of course, I'm not going to talk about what can I do with every single operating system that is supported by Alfresco, but in the guide, you can find the best place in the internet, the official guides, security guides for every single supported operating system. For example, the security guide for Red Hat, security guide for Solaris or Windows, etc. Just try to follow the vendor guide. Of course, this is not something that is in our ground, but they have very good documentation. Of course, use always network devices like firewalls, intrusion detection system, prevention system, advanced penetration threats or protection threats, web application firewalls like mod security or these kind of things, or antivirus, etc. File permissions at operating levels, operating system level, like take care about the Alfresco Color properties, the content store, Solar, or losing indexes. These some examples. Of course, you remember that Alfresco Global Properties has username and passwords. For example, the connection with the database. So we have to take care about these file permissions. And for example, if we have the Kerberos configured in our Alfresco, we have another XML files with usernames, with passwords. We have to control that files. In Alfresco 5, if it's not the first release, maybe in a couple of months, we are going to have the password encryption inside property files. So this is going to be available in the next version. But anyway, take care about these kind of files. It's with the chmod command, for example, in Alfresco. Use always minimum privileges. Okay, now this is not, this is part of security. This is not the full security. To have a firewall is not to have a full control of the things, but it's important to know what is going on in the server, what is going in and out of the server. Of course, it's very important to get control of your inbound traffic from the Alfresco server point of view and from the network or network firewall point of view. And these are all default ports that we can use. And of course, remember that if we are running Alfresco in Linux, we should run Alfresco as a non-root user. So we cannot open or bind a port below 1024. So we have to use IP tables, for example, to redirect that ports to the official one ports, for example, for sieves, and if we are using sieves or whatever. So this is the full list of ports by default with Tomcat. Of course, if we are using WebLogic or WebSphere, we may use another ports. This is important, of course, because we are controlling the inbound traffic. But it's even more important what is going on from the server to the internet or from the server to the network. Why? Because if someone gets access to our server, the first thing they are going to do is to open a backdoor or to create a tunnel or a connection from the server to the internet. So it's also very important to get control of the traffic from the server to the internet or to our intranet to avoid these kind of backdoors or these kind of things. So this is a list of services that we have to bear in mind when we are configuring the external traffic from the Alfresco server and from our network firewall to the internet. This is also explained in the guide. Going down to Alfresco itself, let's go to review some best practices with Alfresco, implementing Alfresco. First one, of course, stay current. Have the last Alfresco version. Of course, I'm not saying that, okay, we are releasing Alfresco 5.0 in a few weeks, just update to the 5.0. I just want to let you know to have the last hotfix. We are fixing a lot of not just about security, but about performance and these kind of things every single hotfix. So stay current. And this is important because it's not about security. It's about following your best practices using Alfresco. If you have a good installation following best practices, it's going to be easier to upgrade Alfresco. If you have customizations or this kind of developments without following the best practices, it's going to be very, very hard to upgrade Alfresco. So to follow best practices in the development, in Alfresco development, is also a security concern. Okay, it's a security issue. Never run as root. Switch to SSL. Everything that you can. Everything can be switched to SSL. And remember one thing. The Solar, I have Solar right here. Well, it's the HTTPS. Solar is use HTTPS when we are using Solar in a dedicated server, right? Why is using Alfresco and Solar HTTPS? For encryption, but also for authentication. Okay? Sometimes we say, no, I don't need HTTPS with Solar. Okay, maybe you don't need HTTPS with Solar. But remember that the repository connects to Solar in localhost or in a remote server and authenticate to Solar as well. So there is a way to get into the indexes from the repository if you remove or if you have the standard or the dummy certificate. So also use a real certificate or protect your server. Okay? This is explained in the guide, but remember that. Never use a dummy certificate. Okay? Of course, always review your logs and change the default GMX default credentials. It's very easy if you have access to the network of the Alfresco server. If you don't get control of the GMX ports, RMI ports, you can get into the Alfresco configuration and stop the server if you want, or change configuration, or create a new admin user, or whatever. Okay, so change always the GMX default credentials. Audit, enable audit. If you need it, I always recommend to enable the audit. It's easy to query. Well, not really easy, but you can do it with the core command. And of course, it's easier if you have records management installed. Very important, if you have Alfresco Enterprise, install Alfresco support tools. For example, to get to know what users are already connected to Alfresco. It's important to have in your security procedures how to reset the admin passwords in case you miss the admin password or you have any other security issue related to passwords. You can control the ticket session duration if you need to get control of these kind of things for third-party applications or whatever we are using to connect to Alfresco. Always disable unneeded services, and of course disable the guest user if you are not going to use it. Next topic, the content deletion. Why this is important when we are talking about security? Because if you are familiar with Alfresco, if you are working with Alfresco, maybe your boss said, hey, you have to remove this report right now. I don't want to see that report never again. If you delete this report, where is going? We are using the document management, just the DM part of Alfresco. The document is going to the trash bin, right? And it's going to be there forever. Unless the administrator or the user cleans the trash bin. So after the trash can is emptied, after 2 weeks, this is physically, the file is physically moved to the content store deleted. And what happened? The file stays in the content store .deleted forever. We have to delete that manually as well. Okay? This is important because we can think that we have deleted content or very critical or important content, but it is not. So, and even if you clean that thing, if you clean the content store deleted, you have to wipe the file system. But it depends on the file system type, because it's not the same when you are to wipe an X3 or X4 file system than NTFS, or if you have RAID. Sometimes this is related to hardware, but remember this. This is for the document management. This is in record management, record deletion, or when we are using the disposition step called destroy. It works in a different way. This is important, okay? To get control about what is going on with your content if you think that you are deleting content. No, you are not, in most cases. Okay? You have to do more things, like delete content when it is deleted, use the trash can cleaner if you want, get to know that records management works in a different way, and of course, wipe content. The next version of the record management, the RM2.3, not the current, which is 2.2, the 2.3, the next one, is going to have a kind of wipe content. If you remove a record, it's going to be wiped. But we are working on that to increase the records management security when you delete a content. Okay, now let's talk about shared security. This is pretty interesting because thanks to the OWASP, I don't know if you're familiar with OWASP, it's the Open Web Security Standard or something like this. Thanks to this, the OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities found in web applications, we have found some security problems or some security improvements in Alfresco Share. So we have the cross-site request forgery filters, you can enable them or disable them. They are enabled by default in the last Alfresco versions. Also to control the clickjacking mitigation and iframes, to control if you can iframe third-party applications or not inside Alfresco, and many other problems that can be used in Alfresco share, in most cases to hijack an user session or to try to do cross-site scripting or this kind of problems in Alfresco. But remember that most of them can be controlled in Alfresco. You can enable them or disable them as your needs. Of course, from the change, of course, the default session and these kind of things. Or even to filter document actions by user, workflow by user, or roles. All these things are not really easy to implement, but can be done in Alfresco, okay, in Alfresco share. All of these topics are covered also of course, in the guide. Okay, the best architecture best practices. I'm going really fast with this, but this is only some example about how to implement Alfresco in different tiers. But it's really important to consider always use Apache on Nginx or HA proxy, and to control the Alfresco service URL, because it's where all APIs are, the shared service, Alfresco proxy, or Alfresco semis browser. Always protect these URLs, at least these URLs. In the guide, you can find some examples of code, the configurations for Apache, Nginx, and these well-explained URLs. Of course, use different interfaces. We can see here another example. Use different interfaces. It's not the same. If you have a production server, use a network interface for your service, a network interface for backup, another network interface for administration. Try to use different ports and different interfaces for different purposes. And here you go a real-world example about a big infrastructure with load balancers, with different firewalls at different levels, and if you need to get access to your servers, open just the SSH ports, and these kind of things that are really useful, and we have to control different tiers in our network. You have available this diagram to see later, but also, if we are deploying Alfresco in Amazon, we can consider always to use VPCs, virtual private cloud, and different levels from the whole thing and from the different layer of our architecture. Always use front ends. Never expose Alfresco directly to the internet. Okay? And this could be done very easily with Alfresco. If you can do that in 5 minutes with our Alfresco Cloud Formation template, okay? That we have currently for Alfresco 4.1, but we are going to release a new one for Alfresco 5 in some months. Backup and disaster recovery. I was talking about that last summit, so you can download the backup and disaster recovery white paper and see what you have to consider when you are doing backup and the different Alfresco components and these kind of things. Mobile. The most important thing to highlight in terms of mobile and in terms of security maybe is the MDM support that we have with Alfresco for Good for iOS or Mobile Iron for Android. You can get control of your application in your employees' devices. When you are using Alfresco Mobile with Alfresco Enterprise, you can encrypt the content in local in the device itself. And remember that the next Alfresco mobile version will support, well, not the next Alfresco mobile version, these MDM versions, we will support Symantec Sealed, Citrix Works, and another new version for Mobile Iron for iOS. And this is going to be released in a couple of months or so. Another interesting thing that I added to the guide is that we used to be asked very often is, what about Alfresco and the DoD? Well, we know about DoD because we are DoD compliance with the records management. But what about OWASP? So we have the top 10 explanation, the top 10 vulnerabilities explanation, and how Alfresco works with this in the guide. Also, the considerations to take into account when we are talking about HIPAA, FISMA, FedRAMP, the ISO, or many other standards that are not directly related to Alfresco itself, because Alfresco at the end of the day is a component of the whole thing. But you guys are used to ask about what can Alfresco do with this kind of standards. Just a few comments. In the guide, we have added a security checklist. We have seen here a lot of different tips how to control Alfresco, the Alfresco security, but what about if we are going live with our server? Just before going live, print this page, is the appendix 1 in the guide, and review if you have done all these steps, just to try to sleep well after going live with your Alfresco. But this, for example, from switching to SSL, to enable encryption at rest if you have Alfresco 5, for example, to many different options to keep your Alfresco secure. And the last appendix, the appendix 2 in the guide, is a list of third-party components, third-party libraries included in Alfresco, because sometimes we have, as you have seen, we have to take care of that. And that's all, guys. Any questions, suggestions, complaints? Yep.
One thing, you were mentioning the URLs like Alfresco services and Alfresco proxy.
Mm-hmm.
You said only protect these URLs. What were you pointing out? What were you meaning with that?
Well, if you have third-party applications only using the API, you don't need to get access to users or any other potential attacker to that URLs, because you can use that URL to a username and password dictionary attack, for example, or just to try to discover any other vulnerability. Everything that you can protect is always welcome. There is some example about how to allow some servers, internal server or external servers, just to do certain URLs inside Alfresco. Mm-hmm.
If you're running Solar in exactly the same server as Alfresco, do you really need
the key thing is, well, you don't really need SSL if you don't want to use it. But this is not only about the connection between Alfresco server and Solar server. It's also about the authentication. The repository is the only entity that can ask to the Solar server. So,
but it is in the same machine.
yep.
You can anyway monitor all the traffic, but you need special access.
Yeah, if you control if you follow all these steps, that was a vulnerability published, I think, like in January. But if you are using the dummy certificate, this is not very easy. Some vulnerabilities we have found internally, we have found some of them, but they are not really easy to implement. For example, the vulnerability you have seen with the Word document, this is not easy at all to implement, but it is a vulnerability. So it is but it is really difficult to get into a server with this vulnerability. But anyway, for the Solar thing, I recommend to use the certificate, but never the dummy certificate. We are changing some of this configuration in the version 5 because we have another Solar version in the next Alfresco version in 5.0. But always use this. If you have, for example, an Alfresco installation with millions of contents, with a bulk ingestion of thousands of contents per second, per minute, for example, you can disable the SSL, of course, for Solar, or at least for a moment. But for production, SSL. Yeah.
Are you saying, when you say dummy certificate, you're saying not to use self-signed certificates?
The default certificate.
All right, so self-signed.
Yeah, you can use your own self-signed certificate, but not the certificate that is coming with the installation. Yeah. Yeah.
You have quite a list of third-party software, and I expect that you monitor actually potential threats or leaks in there.
We do.
Is there a way for us as customers to access this aggregated information so that we do not need to monitor all the whole list by ourselves?
We do control or try to know what is going on with the most important libraries, like Spring, like most of the Apache libraries, like this Apache Commons Upload, the Apache POI, Apache Tika, because we also contribute with that libraries, and we are related in a certain way with that developments. But we take care about that libraries.
Provide for us a kind of a list where we can look up basically an RSS feed or something similar that we get aware of all the information.
Well, the list is in the guide. The list of every single library included in Alfresco is in the security guide, but we don't provide security surveillance with that. No. But we take care about every single library included in Alfresco. We are really clear. So we have this list published because we want to let you guys know what is included in Alfresco and what is important. Anything else? Any other question? Yep.
Did you implement something like fail to ban to avoid the attacks by username and password?
Fail to ban in.
To find out there's an attack trying just username and passwords on the same IP and getting wrong logins, so we can log out these IPs.
Well, as far as I know, the fail to ban is for the operating system level, right? For
It's independent from the process, but it's log-based. So if you, for example, log out, this user tries the third time the wrong password with that IP, you can extract this from special logs and then use IP table automatisms to log out that IP.
No, I know fail to ban. I have in some of my servers, but from the Alfresco point of view, I don't think this is something that you can address with fail to ban.
Saying this
Yeah.
user tries from that IP to log in.
But you used to.
have this information. You have everything for log to ban, fail to ban.
But I think the best way to get control of the file loggings in Alfresco is with the third-party authentication mechanism that I'm using. For example, in an LDAP, in any LDAP server, you have these controls or the Active Directory. Because in case you are using Alfresco with the Alfresco database, yeah, maybe this makes sense. But
I would bet 80% of the customers still have the NTLM authentication in place. So admin is the user you go to by
well, but if you have in your Active Directory the NTLM, the local default, no, I don't think the most customers are using the local authentication.
in the chain to allow guest login.
But the admin, yes, but yes, you should change the admin user. This is also in the guide. This is not good practice to use the admin user.
The easiest way would be to log failed logins. So you have everything in place to ban
Yeah, maybe in the logging, in the log. Yeah, but we don't have this implemented in Alfresco.
There's, I believe there's failed logins in the audit log, which you can get through a simple protocol.
Yeah.
Audit log, yes.
Yeah, so you turn
With
on
the,
auditing.
yeah, you can turn this on and with a curl command you can. There is an example of curl command in the guide, if you want to see the fail logins and these kind of things. But I think this is something that should be in the authentication side, in the LDAP server or whatever, in the most corporate environments. Okay, guys, thanks for coming.